What's up everybody, welcome back. In today's video I want to have a look at adding the dashing animations from the Lyra starter game. So we can dash in all 4 directions and we have something to replace the fact that we cannot sprint. So right now we can walk and we can run, and if we use our dash animation we have something to get out of dodge quickly. So that's what we're going to do this video, and that's probably the last video for a while where we'll be looking at animation stuff. Because I want to switch things up a little bit, so in the next video we are gonna add our weapon inventory and make our weapon shoot proper and things like that. So let's just dive into the animation part for this video. And there is one little side note, some people were asking if there was a way to show me some love. So I decided to make a Ko-fi page, so you can buy me a cup of coffee or something, and if you decide to do that you will get a special supporter role in the Discord as well. And I plan on adding more benefits for people that decide to show some love in the future. So that's all of the public announcements. Let's just dive into the video. So the first thing I want to do is create an enumerator to make this a little bit easier. So I'm going to go to blueprints and create an enumeration. And this is going to be my character move direction. And let's open it up, and we need to define the enumerators. So I'm going to add 5 in here, and the first one is none if we are not moving at all. And then we have forward, backwards, left and right. So let's add those in here. Forward, backward, left and right. There we go. So now let's dive into the animation blueprint and let's set up some new functions. Come on, there we go. So let's create a new function over here, and that's going to be our set move direction. And it needs 2 inputs, and those are floats. And the first one is our direction. Make sure it's a float. And the second one is our speed. And to make it a little bit easier, we're also going to create a local variable, and that's our local direction. So that will just make the graph a little bit less messy. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag in our local direction and set it over here, so we have that stored. And we also need variables for the enumerator that we just created. So I'm going to add a new variable, and that's my move direction. And that's of the variable type character move direction. So that's the enum that we just created. And then I'm going to duplicate this one, and that's my move direction last frame. Last update. That's better actually. And that's also a character move direction. So I'm going to drag in my last update and get a setter over here. And I'm going to set it to the value that's currently in the move direction. So we can use this at a later stage for something like starting and stopping animations. So if it's forward in the last update and it's none in the new update, then we know we stopped moving, for example. So that's how we can use it. We're not going to use it in this episode, but we're just going to make sure that we have it set up over here. So next I'm going to add a branch, and I'm going to check if my speed is smaller than or equal to 10 to add a little bit of a buffer in here. And if it is, I'm going to just say that we are not moving, so I'm going to set my move direction to none. So plug in this branch, and then I'm going to grab a setter for my move direction, and that's going to be none. And in all other cases we need to make sure that we check our local direction, and we're simply going to check the angle that we are moving in and then set the move direction accordingly. So if our local direction is greater than or equal to minus 45, and it's smaller than 45, so let's make it smaller than or equal to 45, then we are actually moving forward. So we need an end to connect these up and get another branch in here. Connect this up over here, and then we can set our move direction to forward. And we can do the same thing for left and right. So let's just copy the branch stuff and connect it over here. So if we are greater than or equal to 135 degrees and smaller than 45 degrees. So let's grab a smaller than over here. Let me double check. Smaller than minus 45, I'm sorry. Then we are moving to the left, so we can grab the setter over here and set it to the left. And let's paste it one more time. And if we are moving greater than 45 and smaller than 135, so greater than or equal to 45 and smaller than 135, then we are moving to the right. And if none of these are true, there's only one option left, and that's moving backwards. So we don't really need to check anything in here, we can simply set it to backward. And that's really all we need to do in here. So I'm gonna grab a return node and make sure that I hook everything up. So later, if I would go in and edit this function and I would simply end up in here, then this would tell me there's also execution pins over here that I would need to check. So it's not really something you need to do, but it's just a habit I developed to make sure that at a later stage I won't forget any execution pins. So we have the set move direction set up. Now let's go back into our event graph, and we need to make sure that we call it in our event blueprint update animation. But we do want to make sure that our speed and direction is actually set. So make sure that you call it a little bit further down the end. So I'm just gonna drag it in over here. And then we can plug in the variables that we already have. So the speed and the direction. And that should give us our correct move direction. The next thing we are going to do is create a second function to play our dash montages. So let's create a new function and call it play dash montage. And in here, this needs an input, and that's our character move direction again. So let's call this the direction. And that's our character move direction enumeration. And then we can drag off here and look for a switch node. And that will make it a little bit easier to define all the options. So now if we create a local variable in here. So let's create a new local variable, and that's our local dash montage. And that's an animation montage. Oh, there we go. Then we can simply set them over here to the correct values, and the dashing montages are in the assets by default. So if you imported them at the beginning of this series, then you should have them. So we can simply add dash forward for the non and the forward direction, and then I'm gonna copy the node 4 times. And make sure that we set the correct animations, so that's dash backward, dash left, and dash right. And after this we can get a montage play node. And this actually has the animation instance as a target, so we can simply hook it up into the execution. And we don't need a reference to our character or something like that, so we can simply drag in the montage over here, and that should be good to go. We're going to disable stop all other montages, and then we can simply grab a return node, and we should be good to go over here. So we have the animation blueprint mostly set up. Let's browse quickly to the dashing montage over here, and I'm going to open it up. So we don't need to do anything in here, but I'm going to show you by default that the default group is set to the full body slot. So we need to make sure that we actually use our full body slot to make this montage play. And if you would open up the animation sequence that belongs to this, then you would see that the root motion for the montage is disabled. So we're going to actually make the actual dash movement apply in another way. We're going to apply an impulse to the character. But we'll get to that later. First, let's dive into the animation graph and make sure that we add a slot node for our full body. And I'm simply going to add it all the way at the end before the output pose. So this basically means that this slot node will ignore the entire animation graph and it will simply play the montage that's in this slot. So make sure that we set it to the full body slot and connect it up, and that should be good to go. So now let's have a look at setting everything up in our character. So first of all, we are going to need a new action mapping. So let's go to our project settings, to the input section, and let's add a new action mapping for dashing. So dash, and I'm going to use my left alt key, but whatever you prefer. And now let's open up the character, and in here the first thing we need to do is make sure that we have a reference to our animation instance. So I'm going to go to my event begin play, and let's get our animation instance, and make sure you get the one for the mesh, so not for your weapon mesh for example, but for your character mesh. And we need to cast it to the correct animation blueprint, so cast to Quinn animation blueprint. And we're gonna promote this to a variable, and that's our animation instance. So make sure that you hook up both of the execution pins if you are left with the locally controlled branch over here. So the animation instance exists on all instances of the character, so both on the host and the clients, and you want to make sure that all of the characters have a reference to their own animation instance. So make sure that you connect up both the client and the server pins. So then we are going to create an event for our dash input. So let's create the action event, and we also need a new function to check if we actually can dash. So I'm going to simply create a new function, call it can dash, and I'm going to give it one output, and that's a boolean that tells us if we can dash. So I also want to add a boolean for my character that's called isDashing, and the first thing I want to do is drag this in here and make sure that it's false. Oh, not this one. I want to get a not boolean, and then I'm gonna grab my animation instance, and I want to make sure that I'm not playing a turning montage, so get is playing turn montage. And I'm also going to get a not node over here and plug those into an end. And this should be our definition for now. So I'm going to hook this up to a branch. And if this is true, we can dash. And if it's false, we cannot dash. Oh. There we go. So with this setup, let's go back into the event graph, and there is one little side note. So right now I'm going to handle this locally. You could debate on if that's something you want the server to handle or not. I'm going to get back to that in the next video, where we're going to create our weapon inventory and make our weapon shoot and things like that. I want the server to have full control over those things, but for dashing I don't really care as much. The reason you would have the server have full authority normally is because that would make it a lot harder for clients to cheat. So for all important gameplay stuff, you would normally have the server in charge of everything. But right now, for the can dash, I'm simply going to handle this locally. So if we can dash, then we're going to set our isDashing to true. And then we need to call our dashing functions, but we don't have them yet. So let's create custom events. And the first one is our ability dash. And that's a normal event. And we need the replicated events for this. So we're going to create more custom events. And the server ability dash is the second one. And this is replicated to run on the server. And then we need a third custom event, and that's our multicast ability dash. And that's a multicast replicated event, so make sure you set it to multicast. So the server ability calls the multicast event. And for the normal one, we need to decide if we are the server or the client. So we're going to grab our has authority node again. If we are the server, we're going to call the ability dash multicast, and if we are a client, we're going to call the server function. And now let me see, for the actual ability we're going to grab our animation instance over here and play our dash montage. And this requires a direction as an input, so we're going to plug this into the node over here. And then make sure that you do it for the server function over here and for the normal as well. So we have the variable passed on over here. And then we are going to go back to the actual input event and we're going to call our ability dash. So that's the normal one. And over here it will split it in the server and the client. And we can simply drag in our animation instance and get our move direction. So not the last update, but the normal one, and plug this in over here. And then we should play the dashing montage right now, but we need something to apply movement. And we're going to do that over here in our multicast event. But we want to make sure that only the server applies the movement. So we're going to grab a branch and we're going to check if we are the server. And I'm going to create an actual function for the applying of the impulse. So I'm going to create a new function and it's called server at dash impulse. And we need the character move direction in here again as an input. So let's create a direction. And that's the character move direction enumeration. And now we can add the switch over here again. So if we create a local variable in here, and that's called our local impulse, this needs to be a vector. And then we can simply set it according to the direction that we want to dash in. So we're going to right click in an empty spot and we're going to get our actor forward vector. So if we want to dash forward, we want to multiply this forward vector. So multiply it, and we're going to change this lower pin to an integer. So right click, convert pin, convert it into an integer. And then we can simply multiply this with something like 1000. You can play around with this number to dash further or less further if you would like. So the forward one is going to go into the none and the forward pin over here. And then we can simply copy and paste it. And for the backward, we can multiply it with -1000. And then for left and right, we want to get the actor right vector. So we get rid of the forward one and we're going to look for get actor right vector. So we want to dash left. So we need to multiply this with a -1000 and plug it in. And copy and paste it and multiply it with 1000 for right. And that should be good. So now I'm also going to add a little bit of upward movement. So I'm simply going to grab a second setter over here, plug everything in, and then add some z velocity as well. So grab the current vector, add, and I'm going to add something like 250 to the z axis and plug it in over here. And then all we need to do is apply the impulse. So I'm going to grab my character movement component and then add the impulse. So because this is the character movement component, all of this will be replicated by default. And that's why we only need the server to actually apply the impulse over here. So the character movement is replicated by the engine by default. And that's why you don't need to worry about anything like that. So depending on how you would apply the impulse, you would need to make sure that you do this with either a multicast or like we do right now with a replicated event. So if we enable the velocity change over here, that will give us a bit more of a constant response. And then we're going to add a return node. And that should be good. Compile, thank you. And then if we go back into the event graph, we can call our server at dash impulse over here, connected to the true pin, and make sure that you plug in the direction over here. And then really all we need right now is a cooldown to make sure that we set the is dashing back to false again. So let's create a new custom event and call this our dash cooldown. And all I'm going to do in here is add a delay of 1 second. and then set my is dashing back to false. And then we should be good. So let's compile, save, and let's give it a go. So let me increase this. So if I press the Alt key while I'm moving, then you could see I am dashing right now. It's only not setting it back to false because I can't dash for a second time, because I didn't actually call my dash cooldown. So make sure that you actually call the cooldown function, and that should make it work so you can dash multiple times. So right now we can dash in all 4 directions, and the stuff is being replicated over the network as well. So that will probably work for the server. There we go. So we can dash in all directions, and I can't spam the button, so I can't use it to actually fly around. So the cooldown is also working. Although we are handling it locally, but as I mentioned, something you could debate on whether you want to do it like this or not. So in the next video we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. For now this is going to be everything, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and please leave a like if you did. If you'd like, you can join the GameDev Raw Discord, the link is in the description, and also make sure to check out my new Ko-fi page. So thanks for watching everybody, later.